Hey, Patrick.
Hey, Michael J.
So, a little more Amonkhet, if you're so inclined.
A little
bit more,
dude. Stuff has been popping. The last week has, it's been a source of a lot of Amonkhet previews that are very, very worth chit-chatting about.
Yeah, I mean, I know we say this kind of stuff all the time, but I am so excited for this set. Like I really feel like these are the kind of cards that I so enjoy playing with.
Sweet. Glad to hear it.
Thanks. I'm a big fan of the Amonkhet. So you have
what's your favorite card preview so far?
Oh, I think that's
kind of too tough of a.
No, I know which one's the cards I like the best. I think like Curator of Mysteries or Drakehaven. Those guys are buddies. I think that
seems right up your alley.
I mean, I think last week I said something along the lines of I could imagine a deck that just would win with Drakehaven, but I can no longer imagine a Drakehaven deck that would not play Curator of Mysteries. So I think that that's just simply not true, because any deck that I can currently imagine that would play Drakehaven would also play Curator of Mysteries. So there will be...
There's a lot of Curator of Mystery decks, by the way, that I would play that don't involve Drakehaven.
Oh, I agree. I think that Curator of Mysteries... I hesitate to say that he will be a cross-format all-star, but he has a lot of the traits of a card that you would want to play in a lot of different formats. So actually, let's just start with that one.
I wouldn't say all-star, I'd say role player, but cross-format to be sure.
Yeah, so no, I said I don't think he will be a cross-format all-star, but I think that he's got enough attributes that are like 4 out of 10 or 6 out of 10 or better all at the same time that you just add those things together and he might get a spot on the bench. So Curator of Mysteries is a creature sphinx. He is 2 UU, so 4 total mana for a 4/4 flying creature. And right there, that's already better. If they had no drawback as well as no special abilities, he would already be better than creatures that have performed really well in competitive formats. But he has other abilities, right? So in addition...
who are we kidding? A 4/4 flyer for 4 is not getting it done in this league.
No, it's not getting it done, but he's already, he's got some conversation to him, I think, at that point already.
A 4/4 flyer for 4? It's going to need a little upside these days. You're right, 4/4 flying with drawback back in the day. But... anyway, tell me more. What's behind it? Show me the goat.
Yeah, he's got 2 things. He's got whenever you cycle or discard another card.
Scry 1. Sure.
So this is the same language they've used in a bunch of places where cycling and discarding are a little redundant. But that's pretty powerful, and we can talk about the implications there. And then, in addition, he has the ability Cycling You. So he's a 1 mana activation cycler, which is extraordinarily attractive to me.
Yeah, that's because you're good at evaluating things like opportunity cost.
So, so this is why I think he's going to get played. I think that, interestingly, his plan A is to be cycled, right? So he's on the order of a Ponder, Opt, Preordain, way worse than every single one of the cards that I just named, but on the order of those cards, right? He's not like...
It's an instant, too. It's an uncounterable instant.
He's not half as good as a Ponder, right? He's like substantially better than half as good as a Ponder, and he's not a spell, can't be countered, like you said. He doesn't... when you cycle him, he doesn't do something like trigger a counterbalance. It's so that's different. In addition, he's a real cheap and easy way to get a creature in terms of types into your graveyard.
At instant speed.
Yeah, if you're in the neighborhood to have multiple types in your graveyard for, I don't know, an Emrakul or Delirium, he's going to help you out there. And then his fail state is 4/4 flyer for 4 with an additional pretty good ability.
That is a good ability.
When he's in play, if you cycle a card, right? So the way it works is if I do cycling with Curator of Mysteries in play, I discard the card, that triggers Curator of Mysteries. I get to scry 1, and then I draw the card, right? Yep. So he's just like perfectly situated in terms of his timing, in addition to being maybe he doesn't get it done just on being a 4/4/4, but he's got that whole not horrible fail state and awesome other state, and I think he's just best friends with Drakehaven, which I predict is going to be a really, really telling card in terms of its performance in Standard.
Mm-hmm. I think it looks good. I think Drakehaven looks good. I think Curator of Mysteries has got a lot of applications, though. Like, Drakehaven is obviously first and foremost, but let me hit you off with a couple of combos that I think are very, very worth discussing. So first of all, it sounds silly, and maybe it's just stacking more of the Drakehaven experience, but it really is true. The Archfiend of Ifnir.
Yep.
Once you care, like they have the same input whenever you cycle or discard another card, right? And if you're going to load your deck full of cycling cards, it's great to be able to get double paid.
Sure.
Okay, here's another one. Our preview card from last week, New Perspectives. So New Perspectives lets you, obviously when you play, you draw 3 cards, but then as long as you have 7 more cards in your hand, you can pay 0 rather than cycling costs. And we're talking about cycling mana costs. You still have to pay, like, discarding the card, for instance. But if you have Curator of Mysteries in play, now you can, like, as you're cycling, when your top card is not a cycling card, you can, like, scry it to the bottom, like, much more often. So your ability to draw your whole deck is actually, or to go through your whole deck is greatly increased. I don't know. I just think that there's something interesting to that. It's not out of the question to potentially be able to play that even in Standard somehow.
Yeah, I think that any of these decks that we're kind of spitballing, whether it's an Archfiend deck or a Drakehaven deck, or actually, I think that there's maybe just not like a Dynavolt Tower deck, right? Like a Dynavolt Tower deck probably wouldn't be purely best friends with Curator of Mysteries, but I think most other decks that aren't so reliant on like instant and sorcery as types he's just going to go in because he just smooths your draw out and has a great fail state.
Well, it depends. It really depends on how well. Like, I think it could be very easy to imagine that you're just going to play with all these one-cost cycling cards. The next thing you know, your hand is glutted with cast-outs and Curator of Mysteries, and you're just getting beat down by one-cost, like Toolcraft exemplars and stuff. But what do you think of Curator of Mysteries with Liliana, Death's Majesty? This is one of my favorites, personally.
Liliana, Death's Majesty. So that's the 5 casting cost Liliana, not the 7 casting cost Liliana.
Right.
I'm talking about. So Liliana, Death's Majesty is 3 BB for a 5 loyalty Planeswalker, and she has 3 abilities. The first one is +1, so it goes from 5 to 6, or higher, depending on her situation. Create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. Put the top 2 cards of your library into your graveyard. And then she has a -3, so she can utilize the -3 immediately upon being cast because she's 5 loyalty to start. Return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. That creature is a black zombie in addition to its other colors and types. And then she has a third ability, which is -7, destroy all non-zombie creatures. So she wouldn't be destroying either of the creature types that she's creating with her first 2 abilities because they're both zombies. So what you're saying is cycle this guy, play Liliana, reanimated immediately.
Yep.
That seems pretty convenient. I think that there's lots of stuff that you can do with her as just a 5 casting cost reanimation card. I think this is really, really a powerful card, right? It's on the order of an Unburial Rites, but you can get so much more mileage out of it.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that it's only 1 mana more than Gideon, and you're getting the Gideon effect, except you start at 6 loyalty instead of 4 when you tick up, and you're getting another one every turn. So you're having a more profound impact on the board than Gideon.
For the first turn that she's out, you mean?
And each turn, Gideon's making a 2/2, she makes a 2/2. So you're already having, you're both making 2/2s each turn, but her loyalty is ticking up, whereas Gideon's is not. And then Liliana's also, this whole time, she's milling you. So any graveyard shenanigans you have, any amount of delirium action, any scrap heap scrounging, any amount of any of that stuff, she's also enabling. So she's having a bigger impact both in loyalty and in self-mill turn to turn than Gideon. And so that's already, I think, just a very attractive option. It's a very, very appealing option. And then her -3 ability, that's great. The fact that, like, it's like you have an Unburial Rites, except that instead of flashing it back, you just have a Planeswalker in play. Which is like a Gideon. She's like a Gideon. It's like for 5, you get both a Gideon and a Zombify.
Yeah, if you were going to, like, I don't know, just for sake of argument, you started on something along the lines of an Oath of Gideon, right? So she had 6 loyalty to start. You could just go -3, and, you know, she's just 2 cards. It might be substantially undercosted, you know, depending on how things roll for you. This card's, I think this card is going to be played, Patrick.
Oh yeah, and the fact that you can cycle Archfiend of Ifnir or Curator of Mysteries. Now, keep in mind, you could, of course, just drop her and make a 2/2. So, in many ways, you're paying 4 loyalty effectively, because instead of ticking up 1, you're going down 3. But you get a Curator of Mysteries or Archfiend of Ifnir, or depending on the game state, I mean, it's not out of the question to imagine that you might have, like, discarded a Torrential Gearhulk or something, like, to your Oath of Jace or something, right? Like, Torrential Gearhulk might fit with some of your other stuff anyway. And if Liliana happens to reanimate something big, and you're going to be interested in any kind of looting, you know, you might play Liliana with Cathartic Reunion, for instance. You might play her with whatever, because if you're playing Archfiend of Ifnir and Curator of Mysteries anyway, it's important to remember that Cathartic Reunion and Oath of Jace give you 2 triggers each.
Yeah, I think that's pretty likely, actually. I think that if you're talking about playing some of these cards like Archfiend of Ifnir or Curator of Mysteries or Drakehaven, there's a non-zero chance in Standard that they're going to be played with just regular looting sort of cards like Cathartic Reunion. I can imagine Liliana, Death's Majesty being played in maybe even a black-red deck where you could start with a Curator. I'm sorry, with a Cathartic Reunion, discard Goblin Dark Dwellers, right, and then rebuy the Goblin Dark Dwellers on turn 5 with Liliana, and then get back. You at least have the ability to get back the Cathartic Reunion, if not something else that you've cast in the intervening turns. So that's just going to give you kind of so much action, and it's all pretty good stuff.
Definitely some appealing stuff. Here's one of my personal favorites to get back with Liliana, by the way. Shefet Monitor. Shefet Monitor, which is 5 and a green for a 6/5 lizard with cycling of 3 and a green. And if you cycle it, when you cycle Shefet Monitor, you may search your library for a basic land card or a desert card, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. So first of all, that implies desert, right? Now, there's a card, allegedly, Sun-Scorched Desert, which is when Sun-Scorched Desert enters the battlefield, it deals 1 damage to target player. And you can tap it for a colorless mana. So I don't know that they're going to have actual desert in this set.
But does this count as a desert? It doesn't say land.
It does.
Desert.
Sun-Scorched Desert does. Its subtype is desert. Yeah, its subtype is desert. When Sun-Scorched Desert enters the battlefield, it deals 1 damage to target player. And I don't know that you really even want to play that. Maybe you do. You could easily. It's kind of nice having the option, and it's not a tap land or anything. And it's particularly nice if you wanted to be playing any kind of like reality smasher type of business. I don't know that you do, but if you do. But either way, this card is like a Krosan Tusker. Shefet Monitor is like a Krosan Tusker, except it's got a few advantages. First of all, it's a 6/5 just like Krosan Tusker, except it costs 6.
Instead of 7.
It costs 5 and a green instead of 5 green. That's already a big deal. You really do cast Krosan Tusker. Of course you're going to cast Shefet Monitor sometimes, right?
I think that Ben Rubin and Brian Kibler, a couple of Hall of Fame caliber amazing deck design types, I think they played Krosan Tusker in Extended once. It was their kind of green factor fiction.
Yep. Now, the second thing is that Shefet Monitor's cycling. Well, it costs 4 instead of 3. Definitely a big deal. It's got a couple big advantages. The first is that it puts the land into play. Krosan Tusker put it in your hand. Still sweet. It was still a great card. This puts it directly into play. So you can actually ramp, right? I mean, hell, if you have 2 Shefet Monitors, the first one ramps you right into the second one if you want. This is a 4-mana draw 2, and it's at instant speed. It's a draw 2. I mean, you're only getting 1 card in your hand, but you're literally getting a ramp into play. Like you're ramping your mana without even going down in cards.
So it's extraordinarily powerful because not only is it it's an uncounterable 2-for-1, right, for 4.
Yeah.
So it's on the order of a Glimmer of Genius, right, which is a heavily played card in Standard. And so instead of just getting 2 random cards from the top of your deck...
Scry 2 either.
And it's Scry 2, right, into your hand, you get 1 in play. But it's with selection, right? It's like with 100% selection.
It's like, think of it this way. It's like Glimmer of Genius is giving you a Serum Visions and a cantrip plus 2 energy, right?
But it's
Shefet Monitor, instead of a Serum Visions and then 2 bonus energy with a cantrip, it's giving you a instant speed rampant growth for 0 mana.
So it's actually a little bit better than that, Patrick. In addition to getting a desert, which you can't get with a rampant growth, it puts the card into play, onto the battlefield, not put it onto the battlefield tapped, right?
Great point. Great point.
You could, let's say you're just in the worst situation. You're about to die to, I don't know, some sort of, maybe you're just getting beaten down, or you're just getting attacked by, a 3/2 or like a 2, whatever, something. And you have 1 card, it's a Shefet Monitor, and you have 4 lands in play, and you're just like, just going for it, right? And you just go, Shefet Monitor, go get my swamp, or Shefet Monitor, go get my mountain. And then after you do this, the card even reminds you, do this before you draw, and you peel a shock or fatal push, and it just gets you there. And the thing is, like, you have 1 card in hand, you only had 4 available lands, and it actually just gives you this huge, like, tactical wrinkle that wouldn't exist if it put the land into play tapped. And I don't know if this comes up so often. I think it'll come up.
Oh, yeah.
This is... So...
It's effectively as mana efficient as Krosan Tusker anyway, if you use the mana.
Yeah. I mean, it obviously has a full mana higher tipping point. So, if you were stuck on 3, Krosan Tusker is your best friend. If you're stuck on 3, Shefet Monitor is going to be stuck in your hand.
Yeah, but this card is fantastic, I think. This card just looks amazing.
So one of the things that...
But my point was just you can go Shefet Monitor into Liliana.
Oh, that's
Bing,
natural
bang.
best buddies, right?
Yep.
So, especially you'll also fix your mana, right? So if you only have black, right, you can get another one. So here's the thing that I think that is really cool about Shefet Monitor. It costs so much to cycle. And we've seen in the past, right? Who knows if we'll see it in this. What is it? Resounding cards? Resounding Thunder? Is that the name? So,
and there was some in Onslaught, too.
Yeah, so like really expensive sort of... like Decree of Silence or something, right?
Yeah, there was Solar Blast, stuff like that, yeah.
So...
Krosan Tusker.
Any of these cards that have like a non just, U or 2 cycling cost, I think that Shefet Monitor has an outsized amount of synergy with New Perspectives, right? So New Perspectives is cool in that it makes any cycling 0, right? So that's one of the things you pointed out when we previewed the card last week. It's better than a Fluctuator, but it's really so much better. Not when you're taking a card that costs U or W to 0, but when you have a card that costs like 4, you're saving 4 mana, not 2 mana. And, that's... Who knows if they'll ever get played together, but it certainly does something more powerful than normal.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think Curator of Mysteries, all kinds of good buddies, and Liliana. God, Liliana deserves a chapter all of her own, too. But while we're kind of, bouncing around a little bit, this is a little... I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's worth just sticking on the cycling thing for a minute, because there's just... God, there's so many cards to try to hit, but I wanted to see what you thought of Deem Worthy. 4 and a red for an instant. Deals 7 damage to target creature. And it has cycling of 3 and a red. When you cycle Deem Worthy, you may have it deal 2 damage to target creature.
I think this is a really interesting card, but I'm not sure where I'd want to house it, right? So, I don't think that I would want to deal 2 and draw a card that often, and I really don't know when I'd want to pay 5 to deal 7. But I can imagine wanting to do both of those things, right? If you're playing a cycling deck or based around Drakehaven, I think that the cycling cost on Deem Worthy is probably more than I'd want to invest, because it's not really building against my redundancy if I'm using the 2 mana to shock rather than make a Drake. So I probably need 5 to do anything there. But it is cool to deal 7, right? But I don't know. I don't know the last time I wanted to play a point removal card that costs this much mana. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's probably too much most of the time. I'd have to really be in the market for a 5 mana deal 7. I think that there's just too many better ways to do 2 damage. I don't think that's really going to be what it's about. But there's a different one of this cycle.
But you can totally imagine wanting to do both of those.
Yeah, it's not out of the question. Thing. Yeah, I could imagine. It's not. Yeah, I wanted to do one of the softer ones of that cycle before getting to Stir the Sands. 4 black sorcery, create 3 2/2 black zombie creature tokens, and it has cycling of 3 and a black. And when you cycle it, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token, aka Decree of Justice.
So. Yeah, this is very, very different in terms of its aggressiveness of its costing. It costs less. I'm sorry, it doesn't cost less. Sorry, but its efficiency is great, right? It's 6 mana for 6 power and toughness across 3 bodies, which you at least think about this for a second before you dismiss it. But the fact that for 4 at instant speed, you can create a zombie and draw a card, it's I don't know if it's its failsafe. It's probably its normal mode of usage.
It's the normal mode, I think.
Is Striped Bears at instant speed, right?
Uncounterable, instant speed Striped Bears with tribal implications. And this zombie token is not tapped. It is untapped. You can block with it immediately. It could be a surprise threat after your opponent's Fumigate. There's a lot of things it can do. But what do you think of when you have New Perspectives? The fact that when you cycle... So when you have New Perspectives and all the cycling costs are free, when you play Shefet Monitor, you end up a mana. And up cards, right? And when you cycle Stir the Sands, you end up a zombie, even though it costs you nothing. And when you cycle Vizier of Tumbling Sands, which is the 2 and a blue for a 1/3, tap to untap another target permanent, cycling of 1 and a blue. And when you cycle it, you can untap target permanent. Vizier of Tumbling Sands is a clunky accelerator of sorts, right? You can play it on 3, and it does accelerate you. It lets you play Archfiend on turn 4, or it lets you play New Perspectives on turn 5. But when you're going off, you can actually net a mana with Vizier, because you can cycle it for 0 and then untap target permanent. And so if the Vizier is netting you mana, and the Shefet Monitor is netting you mana, Stir the Sands you may or may not want, but it is a quality card that lets you actually net some more board presence, Because it's one thing to just be in your fluctuator mode, right? But if you're actually, like, making progress through your deck where you're actually getting ahead on everything, you're getting tokens, you're getting mana, you're gaining life if you have renewed faith, you're getting, you could end up in a spot where you just rip and you're cycling, you're scrying at the top of your deck because of the Curator. You could be just having like a profound impact on the game. That's what I think.
With all those things. But is it more interesting if there are permanents that tap for multiple mana? Like, what's his name? The artifact. It taps for 2. Sack it, draw 2 cards.
Yeah, Hedron Archive.
Yeah, I always forget that one's name. But yeah, so Vizier of Tumbling Sands, you could be good buddies with him. I guess if you have new perspectives in play, the normal bounds of how we proceed through a turn, or what a single tap for a permanent is changes quite a bit.
All those untaps might be particularly sweet anyway if you have Drakehaven, right?
Oh,
just
sure.
because then you have a way to spend that mana. Another cycling card of note. Censor, which is 1 and a blue, instant. Counter target spell unless its controller pays 1, and then it has cycling of blue.
Man,
so it's a 4 spike for 1 more, but it has cycling of just a single blue.
I heart this card.
I thought you would.
I heart this card. And maybe it's great. Maybe it's horrible. I'm not sure in terms of its.
I don't think it's horrible. I don't think it can be horrible.
I mean,
it's cycling a blue. It's real hard for any card with cycling blue to be horrible.
But I mean, people just tap their 4 for their Gideon. That's what they do.
Yes.
I mean,
this card seems great to me.
I think like this is a whiz bang. At least it's starting mode, right? I don't know what the end of the standard or summer standard looks like, but I think if I'm playing blue, I've got 4 censors in my main deck.
If you're a person who has ever registered a deck, ever, using the poorest of miscalcs, if you have ever found yourself in a spot where your opponent's playing Heart of Kieran and you're like, well, I guess that's fine, seeing as it's an artifact, you need to invest in some censor. One of the things I love about Censor is that you can hold it up like you're going to counter their spell.
Yeah.
And if they don't tap out, you can just cycle it and try to find an answer anyway. Like, the biggest problem with Force Spike is that later in the game it doesn't do anything. Censor, that is not the case.
Oh my god, there's the best. I don't know if you know this story, but it was, I think it was BDM against Ben Rubin. And BDM had the card Shelter. It was a limited team tournament, and he just drops his Shelter. Shelter is 1 and a white for a creature gains protection from a color. Draw a card, and then so Ben plays like really conservatively because BDM drops this card, right? So he's like, oh shoot, I can't bluff it now. So he just cycles it later to get through his deck. So Ben just makes a big play, and then BDM gets him with his other Shelter. that he had drawn. I think you can do the same thing with Censor, right? Where you can just like drop your Censor so people play off curve because they don't want to play into your Censor, and then they're like, all right, I'm going to time walk myself and play this thing later after you cycle it, right? You're like, all right, shoot, you're not going to play around my Censor anymore. I'm just going to cycle it, and then you just get him with your other Censor. I think that's going to be a great sub game in at least the games of Standard I'm going to play.
Yeah, I think this card just seems sweet. It definitely seems sweet. I love the gameplay to it also. Bravo to WotC for that. And for making a counterspell that's actually just got some legit aspects to it. Another cycling card. Oh, actually, on the note of Censor specifically, Flameblade Adept. Red for a 1/2 menace. Whenever you cycle or discard a card, Flameblade Adept gets +1 until end of turn. So, obviously, if you have Flameblade Adept, right off bat, I mean, a 1/2 menace is, like, definitely not the worst, right?
I certainly looked twice when I saw this card the first time.
Right, and so then whenever you play a Cathartic Reunion, you're getting +2. When you cycle anything, if you cycle your Curator of Mysteries, you get +1, right? If you cycle your Censor, you get +1. But Censor in particular has a lot of value to a Blue-Red Madness deck, where you're putting down this extra, you're attacking your opponent early, you're putting a lot of pressure on them with some cheap 1 and 2 cost red and blue cards, and then you have Censor, because if they try to walk in, they can't play around, they can't wait, because you'll just hit them for another attack, so they have to play into you, and that's when you get them.
So this is like a different take. I mean, on a similar card in the set, right, is Soulscar Mage, which is R for also 1/2. Instead of menace, it has prowess. All right, so if a source you control would deal non-combat damage to a creature an opponent controls, put that many -1/-1 counters on that creature instead. Like, how do you think about or rate the difference between Flameblade Adept's kind of +1/+0 until end of turn ability from discarding cards or cycling versus just prowess? Right, like I think they're thematically very similar. They're asking you to do something a little bit different with your hand in order to enable each one. But there would be a fair number of cases where the same card would help in both cases.
Well, so they have some. I think that they look very similar, but they actually will frequently take you in very different directions.
Oh yeah, you have to construct your deck differently in order to exploit each one. But I think that they occupy a similar space. That's maybe I'm not describing my thoughts.
Yeah, no. I think you are, and you're right regarding the damage thing. But there's some differences I think that are subtle. To begin with, the Flameblade Adept triggers off of discarding cards for each card, right? So if you activate Chandra 6, or you discard your hand to a Collective Defiance, Flameblade Adept just attacks for 8 right there, and it's hard to block because the Soulscar Mage is easy to block.
Well, also in the situations that you described, he would gain between 0 and 1 prowess triggers.
Right. Whereas if you Collective Defiance with a Flameblade Adept, frequently you removed one of their blockers. Your guy has Menace anyway. You went upstairs for a bunch, and also your Flameblade Adept is going to you probably do half their life in one hit. And if you have 2 Flameblade Adepts, they might be dead. Right? I think that's a very, very explosive thing.
I like all the things you said a lot. I would like to subscribe to your podcast.
The ability to discard, whenever you cycle or discard cards, you can do other effects, right? When you're cycling cards, first of all, obviously, there might be some crazy stuff you're doing where you're playing Curator of Mysteries, you have it in play, you're cycling, you're getting value, but you're also just doing extra damage. That's all well and good. But the fact that it has Menace is actually I think that's an important part of the puzzle, right? There's lots of little ways that Menace can add up. They might double block, and then you play a pump spell, right? They might be in a spot where they always have they have to keep 2 creatures back to block, and then you bounce one. I mean, there's any number of things you could do. You could play a Cartouche of Zeal, put it on your Flameblade Adept and get in there. I don't know. There's lots of things you can do in that area. But there's Soulscar Mage, I think, also has some subtle beauty to it as well. Soulscar Mage stacks. It makes all your non-combat sources of damage to your opponent's stuff. It distributes -1/-1 counters. So if you're playing some kind of red aggro deck that can take advantage of the prowess because you're just pumping with shocks and so on, even if your opponent has a god, you can shock the god and start shrinking it. right? But you can also, it's important to note, these are -1/-1 counters. These aren't just -1 to the toughness. So if Soulscar Mage attacks by itself, even if it's blocked by a 4/4, you can shock the 4/4, immediately shrinking it to a 2/2. And the Soulscar Mage is now a 2/3. Kills it and lives. That is a much, much different story than red aggro cards have traditionally had against fatties. This is going to be very influential against things like Winding Constrictor decks, against any sort of, and just fatties. The possibility of getting outclassed is so much smaller of a thing. And in particular, Soulscar Mage is interesting with the black enchantment. Where is it? What is it called? The one that makes the 1/1s. Nest of Scarabs. 2 and a black enchantment. Whenever you put 1 or more -1/-1 counters on a creature, create that many 1/1 black insect creature tokens. So if you have your 1-drop and this enchantment, now every time you play a burn spell on one of their creatures, you get that many 1/1 tokens. A shock will give you 2 extra tokens, right? But you can actually do even better. Because, like, if you, for instance, if you Incendiary Flow, you'll get 3 extra 1/1s on the battlefield all at the same time. And it's not just spot removal, right? Like, if you were to, if you had some way of doing 1 damage to all of your opponent's creatures, then you would get a -1/-1. You would get a +1/+1 insect for every single one. And I don't know, that's it feels to me like that could just spiral out of control so quickly. And that's to say nothing of the possibility of putting like doing tons of damage, right? Like we mentioned earlier that Deem worthy burn spell. If you deem worthy your opponent's creature, you're going to get 7 1/1s extra.
I hadn't really thought about that being a thing I'd want to try, but you make it sound very, very attractive. When I thought of Soulscar Mage, I was really thinking like, oh man, here's a card. This card's got a lot of Monastery Swift Spirit to it, right? And Monastery Swift Spirit.
It looks like that.
But like, you're trading in haste, which is one of the main things that makes Monastery Swift Spirit so great, for this other ability. I'm like, well, this other ability is also, let's think about this. I'm like, wow, you could compete with a Gideon here. You could compete. I mean, theoretically, you can compete with an Ulamog. You could do a bunch of stuff that we would think of as these cards are so often just unstoppable. But this gives you like just regular cards can fight them now. So I don't know. I thought it was some kind of pregnant brewing space here.
So if you have Soulscar Mage in play, and you have the enchantment Scarab Feast. Oh no, that's the cycling card. God, what is
Nest
this?
Of Scarabs.
Nest of Scarabs. If you have Nest of Scarabs and Soulscar Mage in play, you can just drop Chandra, kill your opponent's creature, and get 4 1/1s. Isn't that like a whole big thing? And I don't know what kind of loops there are, because I don't think, like, hopefully they're not just making like Goblin Bombardment. But like, if you were to imagine hypothetically that there was a Goblin Bombardment, Goblin Bombardment would trigger Soulscar Mage and Nest of Scarabs. So you could actually sack your 1/1 insect to do 1 damage to something, and then also get another 1/1 insect. So you can just Plague Wind your opponent from now on, all the time. You can also shoot your own things, but no, that doesn't accomplish anything. You have your opponent on Plague Wind forever. So I don't know. Soulscar, And I don't think that's the only way. I think you can also I think Soulscar Mage is just like totally fine as a red aggro card if you want. You can also just do that. But I want to keep my eyes open for ways to sacrifice creatures, because I think it's going to be weird. It's going to be surprising how much Nest of Scarabs just gives you such a crazy number of counters. Like, for instance, when you have Archfiend of Ifnir, every single card you cycle or discard for any reason, all your opponent's creatures -1/-1.
It's some number of insects, right?
Right, and then you get insects for days. So I think there's going to be some cool stuff there. One of the cards that just jumps out at me as being so obviously just like useful with Soulscar Mage in every way is Cut to Ribbons. What do you think of Cut to Ribbons in general, though? This is the Aftermath card. It's the front side is 1 in red, sorcery, deal 4 damage to target creature. And it has the backside, Aftermath. You can play it out of your graveyard. It's X black. Each opponent loses X life.
So the front side is like, it's okay. You're a little bit overpaying for this ability.
I mean, one would be like Flame Slash itself was like very aggressive.
I mean, it's a card that sees a substantial amount of modern play, right?
Right.
So I think that it's. I mean, think about just Cut to Ribbons for a second in context of previous standard formats, right? When you were playing Core Lash and you played Volcanic Hammer in your sideboard, I mean, Cut to Ribbons would have been so much better, right? Like, it's not even remotely a competition here. Like, the front side of Cut is better than however you were just playing the card that you were playing as an anti-Scab Clan Mauler card. That's one thing.
Yeah, I mean, lots of formats I would play 1 in a red, deal 4 to a creature.
And then the backside is it's just free, right? Like, it provided you can tap for first of all, I think that there will probably be some people who are playing Cut who never played a Ribbons, right? Because there's, all right, this is just the role that I wanted to have in my deck. Got it. And then, the backside is just there. It's an
X spell. It's an X spell. Your 2-mana removal spell kills their thing and then leaves you with an X spell. That's what you want.
Yes, someday in the future. I would just point out 2 things to Ribbons. One of them is it hits each opponent, right? So it doesn't hit target opponent. And it's not damage. Yeah, that's the other thing, right? So, there are a fair number of cards that have bedeviled red mages over the years. This gets around a lot of them. And I think that non-zero consideration. Plus, it's just free, right? You just get to have it someday in the future.
And I think that when you just go turn 1, Soulscar Mage, the fact that now Cut to Ribbons lets you just -4/-4 something, and that's to say nothing of if you have the Nest of Scarabs, so that you're just getting 4 extra 1/1s profit. So I don't know. I think that's all very, that's very exciting.
I think it's interesting, though, when you have these cards all in concert with one another. Soulscar Mage prevents you from overpaying. So imagine your opponent's just got like a 2/3 or a 3/2, something along those lines, which is a common thing that they might have on the second turn, right? When you cut it, you're overpaying on damage by 2 or 1, and then, you get a prowess trigger or something. That's cool. But the Nest sets you up in a situation where, like, you didn't really overpay because you put all those counters on, whether, you needed to put 4 to kill a 2/2 or not. Now you actually get to benefit from all of them.
Yes. Still on the cycling, I guess just generally cycling front, what do you think of Unburden? 1 black, sorcery, target player discards 2 cards, cycling of 2.
Unburden, a classic.
This old chestnut.
So man, that was a card that both I and Zvi Moshowitz put in a lot of decks that didn't win any tournaments.
Yeah, but you didn't have Archfiend of Ifnir and Drakehaven.
Yeah, that's true. We just had it to fix our draw. So, I think this card is my initial blush is it's probably going to be pretty good, right? So there have been many formats where something along the lines of a Stupor is good enough to play, right? And it's not the best card, right? But it's good enough to play. And so I think both modes are actually pretty cool here. So I think probably if there's a maturity to the red cards, and we're seeing some red cards here that are getting some brew juices flowing, and maybe we have some options that are going to allow red to compete. Man, if there's one thing that playing fair standard power level red decks hate, it's somebody getting them for 2 cards with 1 card, because they so often need every card in their hand to win a tight game. And I think that's going to be an application. I think having a card like this just a hassle. We're also seeing some potential for control-ish stuff. You hassle a control deck. Also, like anything that's based on cycling triggers or having more than 7 cards in hand, this is a way that you can pressure somebody so that they're not going to have the tools that make their investments in enchantments and other kinds of permanents in play go, right? Like, if my card only does something if I have a certain kind of card in my hand or a certain number of cards in my hand, I think that, like, bulk card discard is something that can affect whether or not their deck even works. And then cycling 2 cures all ills, it looks like.
Yeah, I think it's got chances to be fringe. I think it'll show up a little bit because of the stuff where it might slot into your Archfiend Ifnir deck in some capacity, but I don't think it'll be that good, personally. I think there's just, in a lot of worlds it could be, but I think there's going to be enough other competition for your cycling slots that it probably won't quite make the cut. But I think it's actually also a very reasonable sideboard card as well.
So I think that if we're going to use the bar of, will this make top 8 of an SCG opener better?
I think it will. I think it will. I think you're right. I think it will. It's not strictly cycling, but it loops back to the same topic we mentioned earlier. What do you think of Reduce to Rubble? Reduce is 2 and a blue, instant, counter target spell unless its controller pays 3, so it's a mana leak for 1 mana more. But the backside, Rumble, is a sorcery with Aftermath, out of your graveyard. You, up to 3 target lands do not untap during their controller's next untap step.
So, I guess the implied play pattern is you counter their 3, right, and then you time
or whatever. Them. Yeah, it could be you counter their Fumigate and then also partially time walk them. Not totally, but yeah, the 3 is the straight up one though.
I'm not loving this card.
Or Gideon. Like if you counter Gideon and then keep their stuff up, neither do I.
Yeah, I think
I just wanted to see if you were. I wanted to see if you were going for it, man.
No,
I know
the Rubble side, like the front side is so overcosted relative to other options we have right now. Like you get a hard counter for 3 mana in standard.
Yeah,
and then the back side is like exciting only if you have something. If you have an advantage on the board, the back side's probably not even worth a card. But it's not asking for a card, so it's not worth a card. But it's you have to work pretty hard to get half a card out of it. So I have a different one of these // cards. I wanted to get your opinion on this. Failure to comply. So this card is a 1 and a U for failure side instant. Return target spell to its owner's hand, so it's a remand that it doesn't draw you.
It's an unsubstantiate.
Kind of.
And that's one side of unsubstantiate.
Yeah, but it's
instead of the unsummon option, it has the flashback of choose a card. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so it's white, comply, aftermath, so you can only play it out of your graveyard. Luckily, failure will put it in your graveyard for you. Choose a card name until your next turn. Your opponent can't cast that card. So it's got like the Reflector Mage action to it. What do you think about this guy? I think it's an interesting card. I'm not sure if it's good.
Yeah,
but I'm also not sure if it's great.
Yeah, I don't. No, it's not great.
Would it have been great if there was still Reflector Mage?
No, not really. It would be playable, maybe, but probably not really.
But
I think it's a trap. I think it's attractive, and I think it's. And there's going to be times where there's a corner case where maybe this will make sense because of its application for yada yada yada. But I think this card is a trap. I think the problem is if the opponent has cards that are of similar power level of two different names in their hand, then the comply didn't do anything, right? Like, okay, I can't play my Siege Rhino, but I'll play my Butcher instead. This is one of those cards that looks like a 2-for-1, and it is. It's just the 2-for-1 the other way.
Yeah, 2-for-1's you.
Yeah. All these cards, though, I think an interesting note about them that I think is worth mentioning, like Cut to Ribbons in particular, they both halves count as a spell for prowess. So if you have your Soulscar Mage in play and you Cut to Ribbons, you're getting an extra prowess trigger on each side. And that little stuff can add up. It's more relevant on the ones that are either cheaper or scale based on the stats. For instance, if you were to play Onward to Victory, Onward is 2 in a red. Target creature gets +X until on a turn where X is its power. And then Victory is 2 in a white. Target creature gains double strike until end of turn. So the front side, Onward, it's basically Berserk, right? And it's an instant too. But it's an instant, but it doesn't give trample. But it also doesn't kill the creature. So if you Onward even your Soulscar Mage, the prowess trigger takes it up to 2. Onward doubles it to 4. You Aftermath of Victory, taking it up to 5, and now it does 10 because of double strike.
But the Onward doesn't get another buff, right? Doesn't it get a static buff? And then any future prowess buffs don't affect Onward, do they? Right. So if it's a 2 when the Onward
I didn't
triggers,
say it did.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think I missed.
Yeah, no. You're right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. But that is, it's not continuing to stack the Onward. But my point is that just Onward to Victory by itself takes your 1 power, your 1, and brings it all the way up to 10. However, if you just had a single pump spell, like if you were to, for instance, play Built to Smash, well, that's an extra 16 damage right there. More. Yeah, I guess it's 16. Anyway, I just think that it's kind of cool that these trigger your prowess twice. And it probably won't come up all that often, but it is a part of the equation. In terms of other cycling cards, or just discard cards in general, what do you think of and we talked about this a little bit, Dissenters Deliverance, right? Like the possibility of using Dissenters Deliverance, which is the 1 in a green, destroy target artifact, and has cycling of green.
So I think that it's potentially going to be main deckable, right? Because you can cycle it away, and then it's going to give you some flexibility to get permanents that you don't normally have the ability to interact with. I think that there's going to be a lot of that, right? The cast out itself is kind of on theme here, because it allows you to deal with Gideon or Ulamog and so forth, but not every deck is white. Dissenters Deliverance has a really, really attractive cycling cost. So, what artifacts are we looking to smash?
Heart of Kirin, Aether Sphere Harvester, Aetherworks Marvel, Dynavolt Tower. Definitely, that's a pretty big one. Potentially a Hedron Archive under the right circumstance. Any of the monuments.
All right.
It's a little sideways, but you might, under the right circumstance, actually kill a Thopter token or something. That's not what you want to be doing. But I think it's mostly about Heart of Kirin and Aether Sphere Harvester and and then also it hits the Gear Hulks, of course. Like it hits Torrential Gear Hulk. Yeah, the fact that it hits Torrential Gear Hulk and Verter's Gear Hulk, that's interesting.
Torrential Gear
and
Hulk.
Hangerback Walker. I mean, no, not the Hangerback. The Walking Ballista.
Dealing with Torrential Gear Hulk is so much of a bonus, right? Like there's so many decks that like they're good. They have good ability to pressure or interact with the Torrential Gear Hulk deck up until a point, but then it's actually the body of the Gear Hulk that gets them because it's so big. Right, and they're like, well, all my guys are small. I didn't put you away. So, I think
it's also interesting. You can cycle it early to help fix your mana, and then you can Torrential Gear Hulk with it.
Oh, that is cool.
Right?
So
that's actually really good.
If we're talking about playing a green and a blue card together,
Teamer.
Sure, this might go in Teamer. Tell me what you think about this. I think this is one of the splashiest cards that's been revealed so far. Nissa, Steward of Elements.
Nissa, Steward of Elements, is the first X spell Planeswalker, I guess. It's X, green, blue. Loyalty X. +2 to scry 2. 0 ability is look at the top card of your library. If it's a land or a creature that costs less than or equal to the amount of loyalty on her, you can put it onto the battlefield. And then her -6, untap up to 2 target lands you control. They become 5/5 elementals with flying and haste until end of turn. They're still lands.
So this card I think it's really interesting and flexible. So I actually want to start with the third ability this time. That's okay.
Good. That's the exact place where I would want to start.
So to begin with, this is not an exciting ultimate for a Planeswalker in the abstract, right? Like, braining someone for 10 is pretty good, but it's not splashy in the same way that many other ultimates are. But what if your context is, I'm just going to say, tap 8, cast Nissa, Steward of Elements, get a 6 loyalty Nissa in play, then immediately -6 to brain the opponent for 10. That's actually an interesting capability on a card that has other text, right? Like, I have the ability to just go tap 8, fireball for 10.
That's not the world's worst Rude Awakening.
No, not at all. And that is a very approachable thing that I think is going to come up a lot. Not come up a little, right? If you have a, depending on what kind of decks end up playing this Nissa, if they're like medium aggressive decks that have the capability to tap for blue, you're just like, you get into a standoff situation against a deck that has primarily sorcery-based defense, you might just kill them, right? It gets you out of flood games. I think that's a thing.
And remember, it's not just that for 8 mana she can go upstairs for 10, which is already, by the way, that's just a very efficient way to do it, right? Like, you can fireball your opponent for 7, but with Nissa, you're actually doing 10. So she's, like, much more efficient than fireball at going upstairs. But outside of that, you can just pay 9. You can go upstairs for 10 and still have a Planeswalker.
The rich man's ultimate.
Now, in addition to the fact that she's just this giant, 10-piece upstairs, she's got 2 other abilities. +2, Scry 2, is in particular interesting when you consider the fact that you can play Nissa as a 3-cost Planeswalker. You can put her down for 3 and have a loyalty on her, like your opponent's playing a control deck or something, but you instantly +2 her. So it's actually like she starts at 3 loyalty.
You and I are on the same wavelength on this card, I think.
I think we are.
I mean, she is also, a 3 casting cost Planeswalker, end of sentence, right? Like, there's a, as soon as you have a Planeswalker that potential casting cost, because she's obviously already also an 8 or a 9 casting cost Planeswalker, like, it opens the door to conversations and possibilities. And Scry 2 is a fine ability. It's all good.
Scry 2 is a very fine ability. I mean, think about how often you've sat there with your Saheeli Rai, another 3-cost Planeswalker. Scry 1 and deal 1 upstairs in a Saheeli Rai deck is typically going to be worse than Scrying 2.
Yeah.
Definitely not always. The pressure matters. But Scry 2 really helps pull it all together.
What I think is so interesting about this card is that the implication is that you're going to be flooded with this card because it has this powerful ability that you can cast it for 8 or 9. So, you know, we're already seeing the beginnings of some ramp, right? And maybe there's going to be a deck that has like a green-based deck that has a ton of lands in it or has access to a ton of mana. Scry 2 is a perfect ability for a deck to just not get flooded when they don't want to get flooded. And
well, but you see, you can actually, if you keep them both, you can just know next turn that you draw the cards you want and leave the land on top, and then activate Nissa and put it directly into play.
Yeah.
Or it doesn't even just have to be a land. You can play Nissa as, like, for instance, if you play Nissa as a 3, you can then next turn, that same turn, you can scry, look, and be like, I'm gonna keep this, I'm gonna keep a card I want, and also Tireless Tracker, because on your next turn, when you 0, you get to just put Tireless Tracker into play.
This is like a super simple implementation. Like, you just play Nissa on 3, right? Scry 2, and there's 2 lands on top of your deck. Keep them both, okay? Draw 1, play the land, use Nissa's 0 ability to put the other land into play, right? You now have 5.
Yeah.
That's kind of really potentially awesome, right? Like,
yep.
So she contextually is a ramp card, and then also contextually is a card that takes advantage of ramp, and also helps you not get flooded.
Yep.
Like,
I think she's going to be the exception that proves the rule about Planeswalkers defending themselves. That's her Achilles heel, of course, is that she doesn't protect herself very well. Her one way to really protect herself is the fact that she cheats the creature directly into play from the top of your deck.
Yep.
If it's a creature, it is a risky thing to just drop Nissa and blind use her, right? Like, without knowing your top card.
I mean, unless you use her for big, right? Like, if you're like...
Well, exactly.
Even then, you might just flip a land, though.
Right, but it might be worth it. Like, you might go Nissa for 4 and then just use her looking for a blocker because you need to defend her. That's all you can do. Maybe, you know? So, I don't know. I think this card is very exciting, and this is a novel Planeswalker. I mean, there's a lot of different versions of the same Planeswalker, effectively.
Yeah.
This, at least, is a new take in a variety of ways. This is kind of cool. And it's worth noting you can play her for 2. Now, she'll die if you don't have something else going on, but if you have an Oath of Gideon or Oath of Ajani, if you have Oath of Ajani, she starts with 1 loyalty because effectively you paid 3. And if you have an Oath of Gideon, she would start with 0, but Gideon makes sure she has 1 extra.
Good point, Patrick. I actually don't mind the fact that Nissa can't defend herself because, especially just looking at the third ability, I think that there will be a fair number of decks that play 4 copies of Nissa Steward of Elements with no expectation that she'll live. That, like, they're in it for number 3, and you know, whether they get there from scrying up or whatnot. Like, I could just totally see a situation where you're just like, you know, probably before turn 8 because you're playing with rampy cards. You're just like, turn 8 brain you for 10, untap, turn 9 brain you for 10. Like that, some proxy of that, where the opponent is actually just helpless.
So, something we didn't quite hit on when we were talking about the Dissenters' Deliverance, but that it's kind of topically related, and I think actually the biggest competitor to Dissenters' Deliverance, Manglehorn, which is 2 and a green, 2 and a green beast, 2 and a green for a 2/2. When Manglehorn enters the battlefield, you may destroy target artifact. and artifacts your opponents control enter the battlefield tapped. What do you think about Manglehorn? As somebody who's played Indrik Stomppower more than most, what do you think of Manglehorn?
What do you think I think about Manglehorn? I played Uktabi Orangutan in my main deck in Standard. I think I played 4 copies on a consistent basis when it was legal in Standard. And this is just much better than that card, right? First of all, it's a beast. So there's probably some context where it gets beast tribal synergies. And you don't need more than 2/2 for 3, shatter and artifacts for me to be on board with the card. It's awesome. But it has this other ability that...
First, wait, hold on. Before we even get to that, when it enters the battlefield, you may...
Oh, yeah.
Destroy target artifacts.
I don't know about you, but I've had...
Uktabi had to. The Uktabi gets down.
Uktabi has killed my own curse scroll. He has done that. He was a jerk, but I need, had to do it.
If you got it, you got to do it. You got to do it.
You got to do it sometimes. And he did it. And Manglehorn will never do that unless I want him to. And he has this other line of text. I mean, how horrible is it if you're just like... Manglehorn, kill your puzzle nut, time walk your Dynamo Tower, or time walk your Marvel. Like it's hard enough for those guys to get that thing online, but it comes to play tapped because your whole big thing is just you get your energy and then you roll the dice as soon as you play it, and he's having none of it, right? Like Dynamo Tower and Marvel and. Is Heart of Kiran coming to play tapped?
It does.
He is not messing around.
Oh, so we haven't even scratched the surface of the iceberg. Are you ready to have your mind blown?
Yes.
Blown. Have you read Saheeli Rai's text box lately?
I haven't. Does he also shut down the comp?
He does.
Wow.
When you have Saheeli Rai and Felidar Guardian... You aren't just attacking with an arbitrarily large number of kitties. They are robo-kitties. They are all artifacts. If you happen to have a Manglehorn and your opponent is sending an army of robo-kitties for you, that robo-kitty army will all be tapped and not a one of them will be able to attack.
That is the best.
That's a game changer. Manglehorn against Kira. Okay, if you're playing Manglehorn against Mardu vehicles, already you're ecstatic, right? You're blowing up Heart of Kirans left and right. You can destroy the Walking Ballista. You can destroy Aether Sphere Harvester, Cultivator's Caravan. Hell, you can blow up a Thraben Inspector's Clue token. Even if you're just killing a scrap heap scrounger, you're getting value. It's so good already, and you're keeping them off of their stuff. Their Toolcraft Exemplar doesn't work. Unlicensed Disintegration doesn't work. None of it, right? Already Manglehorn is amazing, and then when you play against the other big strategy, it locks them out. Now, obviously, they could try to kill it, but it's effectively like a Thalia, where they can't even win until they get rid of the Manglehorn. And that's already the 2 biggest decks. It's a trump card for the combo, and it kills every card in the Mardu Vehicle Deck's deck. And as if that wasn't enough, you're like, well, who in the world isn't playing Mardu Vehicles or Copycat, right? Like, those are the big 2 strategies, but you're like, who else is there? Oh, I don't know. Dynavolt Tower? Would you like to Manglehorn those people? They can't even negate it. You can destroy their torrential Gearhulks. It's Manglehorn's world we're living in now. Even if you play against green-black, and even if they don't have Harakirin, what are they going to do? Not play Verdurous Gearhulk? Walking Ballista? Everything is different now. And that's just Standard. Manglehorn is messed up, man.
I like Manglehorn a lot.
Manglehorn is going to revolutionize things. Everything is going to be different. That's what I'm telling you, man. I think this second line of text is so quietly insane. If somebody's playing Whirler Rogue, I mean,
Virtuoso.
Virtuoso. No, they want to trade 3 energy to make a 1/1. Yeah. Now it's tapped, so they can't block with it immediately by surprise. It's all those little pieces of value They matter. They all matter. They all add up. But at the end of the day, Manglehorn is still just well positioned to disrupt the status quo in a very meaningful way. So that's it. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to get worked up.
I don't think. Oh, I'm happy you did. I felt a great deal of passion out of that made me happy. I don't know. I don't think we're gonna top that one.
Dude, what about the 1-drop though? Dude, there's too many cards. It's insane.
Yeah, but we're gonna keep making this podcast forever until
Yeah. Can we just keep talking about Amonkhet? Like forever.
I love Amonkhet. You know what I really love about Amonkhet? I think that this set, because it's got cards like Magma Spray, which is good against Scrapheap Scrounger and others.
Okay, now you have to let me talk about the 1-drop.
If
you're going to bring a Magma Spray, God, keep going.
It just actually, it's not one of these cosmetic sets that comes in and then does nothing, right? It's going to come in and it's going to turn standard, maybe not on its ear, but it's really going to disrupt what people are playing. And I think the decks that are going to come out of Amonkhet are going to be more fun. That's my guess.
I think so too.
But they're going to be good and fun.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so talk about your 1-drop.
Dude, Dread Wanderer. Black for a 2/1 zombie jackal. It's Dread Wanderer enters the battlefield tapped. So it can block. It's important to know. It can block, just not the turn you play it. So it enters the battlefield tapped. It's a 2/1 zombie. Already, I know you got to be in for that, right? That's interesting. But then it has 2 and a black to return Dread Wanderer from your graveyard to the battlefield, and you can activate it only when you can cast a sorcery and only if you have 1 or fewer cards in hand.
Well, I mean, what is there to say? It's a 2/1 for 1. I'm sure it can't block the turn that it comes out, but it's not hard to imagine the context where this card is extraordinarily annoying.
Look at Tormented Hero, right? Tormented Hero was black for a 2/1 that entered the battlefield tapped. And once in a while, you would get to drain your opponent for 1, right?
Yeah, I mean, not really.
Right.
I think it was single digits the entire time I played that.
Nah, Herald of Anguish was the one that... I mean, the Herald, whenever you... Herald of Torment is the one... People did that to me so many times at the Pro Tour. They would drain me for 1 before I would play Elspeth. Dread Wanderer, though, is a zombie, which has a bunch of tribal interactions, not only from Innistrad block, but this set as well. There's a bunch of zombie lord things in this set. A bunch already.
I think you think it's weird that there's actually jackals, and that they're they've got a 2/1 jackal for 1 here. The original jackal pup isn't even a jackal. That I think is weird.
Maybe they might errata it. Although I think these jackals are anamorphic.
They're jackal
animatronic
or whatever, right? Stereotypical.
The point is that if you're playing Scrapheap Scrounger and Dread Wanderer, you could easily be in for all this stuff. You can discard Dread Wanderer to all your discard outlet stuff. You can play this card over and over and over again. You can it works with self-mill. It works with anything that requires you to sacrifice creatures. It gives you extra bodies. If you're playing some kind of a madness deck, you're going to be discarding all your cards anyway. And there's a bunch of rewards for getting down to 1 or fewer cards anyway. That Hazaret. The Fervent, I guess, is if you go by his real name. This is. I mean, it's still at the end of the day a 2/1 for 1, and there's much bigger stuff sometimes. But if people are hanging around, spending their mana cycling, because they're I got nothing to do for 1, I'm just going to cycle my cast out, right? And then you're just hitting them with Dread Wanderers. That's already, that's something. I just think that's interesting. That's interesting to me.
I buy
Dude,
it.
Why is this set so like this? I love that I actually want to play with these cards. The last couple of sets, there's been some crazy stuff where we're dude, what the hell? That's messed up. And then it was messed up, and also it was messed up. We didn't, like, it was like, this is like, I would like to play with these cards. This is, dude, this is it. I'm back on the GP circuit.
The one that I most want to play with is the Monitor, I think. The big lizard, the 6/5.
Dude.
It's so, I don't know. I don't want to say it's me. I'm not really a green ramp guy, but I feel like I could be with this card available. Like, I can imagine just, like, cycling a bunch of Shefet monitors and drawing some cards and putting some land into play and then just braining somebody with Nissa. I can imagine that. That's probably a great feeling.
What do you think of Pyramid of the Pantheon? Shout out to Peach Garden Oath and Johnny Finkel, Andrew Cuneo, Paul Rietzel, everybody on the PGO are the Pantheon over. I guess they're kind of the Pantheon Puzzle Quest these days.
I was going to say, aren't they Puzzle Quest now?
Puzzle Quest Pantheon, yes.
So, Pyramid of the Pantheon is a 1-mana artifact, so it costs 1. Price is right to start. Pretty good.
That's one of your favorite costs, right? Second favorite cost?
That's a pretty good cost. It's a good cost for an artifact. So it has 2 abilities. One of them is a 2 and a tap. Add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. Put a brick counter on Pyramid of the Pantheon. I don't know. I don't hate that. And the other one is just tap. Add 3 mana of any one color to your mana pool. Activate this ability only if there are 3 or more brick counters on Pyramid of the Pantheon. Wait, Patrick, it doesn't say anything about removing all of the brick counters when you use that ability.
Right, you just have an Endless Lotus now.
Yeah, I think this card is probably really good, right? Like, if you...
This is a Lotus Bloom, right? Like, but it's it's a Lotus Bloom of sorts, but then it just keeps going.
Yeah, like, you play it on turn 1, right? Okay, it's done. Turn 2, you just play a land. Now you can just tap and use it, so it's a terrible signet on the first turn you've got it. It's like negative a mana, but you can make a color, right? It's got a filtering ability to start with, and then you're advancing it a little bit. Like, over the course of the game, I think, like, especially if you draw one later, it kind of, gets your back.
Well, no, you have to charge it up 3 times, right?
Yeah.
And the 3 times you charge it you're losing a mana, right? So you effectively have spent 1 to start and then 1 a turn for 3 turns, but at your leisure, whenever you want, and it was fixing your mana, right? And if you play Pyramid of the Pantheon on turn 3, for instance, and then use it immediately, you only have to wait 2 more turns. But after you've spent 4 mana, now you have a Gilded Lotus, which means on turn 2, 3, and 4, you may have net lost a mana if you wanted to be charging it. But on turn 5, you already have 8. And that's not even counting the fact that if you want, like if you don't have the extra mana laying around, you can still use this for all of your improvise.
I think part of it that's cool to me is, like, you can just play it. If you don't want to do anything with it, you just have some spare mana, you can just put the brick on it at the end of the turn. And it's just a thing. I think you're right about the improvise. That's awesome. But there's like small things, right? Like, maybe you only have 4. I'm just gonna make something. You only have forests in play, and your opponent does something. You're just like 2 tap, use Pyramid of the Pantheon. You've got like a push or a shock, and it's a color fixer too.
Yeah, I mean, if you're playing one of these artifact decks where your mana's like got Spire of Industry, Pyramid of the Pantheon, whatever, right? Like, you might not have very many dual lands because you just want to have all your land come into play untapped.
I think it might be great in the Whir of Invention deck. A couple of reasons. One, like you said, it's got improvise, so it's got some text there. But 2, in the games where you just have Ulamog stuck in your hand, it'll just cast him for you. Like, no big deal. Like, just get some counters on, and just cast your Ulamog. So I think, like...
Well, it also can pump X spells, right? Like, outside of, like, obviously Walking Ballista, right? But outside of Walking Ballista, there's like Pull from Tomorrow, the new X blue instant. Draw X cards, then discard a card. So this is 1 mana less than Stroke of Genius, but it's not that you're getting a card less. You're actually getting all the cards. You just have to discard a card to make up for paying a mana less. But because it's a mana cheaper than Stroke of Genius, you got to draw an extra card anyway.
But you also get to discard the card you want, right?
Right.
Like you don't have to discard a card and then do the thing. Like you get to discard, what you had. Like so, here's like a couple of things that I was thinking about pull from tomorrow. First of all, you can. There might be a reason you want to do this. It's probably unlikely, right? But if you could only cast pull for tomorrow for 2 and didn't have any other cards in hand, maybe you would get a trigger or something from it. It doesn't have any additional penalty, right? You don't have anything else to discard, which is it's because it's not an extra. It's not an extra cost. It's a thing that happens on resolution of the effect of the spell. That's one. But then separately, like this is just an instant card drawing spell. Like you can play it for 4, right? And then you draw 2 cards, have to discard 1. It does not compare favorably to Glimmer of Genius if you're paying 4, right? But
it still compares. It compares very favorably to Stroke of Genius, for instance.
Yeah, but once you're
or Sphinx's Rev,
like it is really starts getting interesting. Like when you're past like the Jace's Ingenuity level, right? Like it starts doing some really good work for you, and I mean it's even interesting on 3, right? Like on 3, you draw 1 card, you have to discard a card. That might be the right thing to do.
Well, okay, so compare it to Sphinx's Revelation. Which would you rather have for 3 mana?
Pull for tomorrow, I would rather have for 3.
Without question, because even though you're not going up cards, if you just have to hit your land drop or you're going to die, right? Like if you have 2 Sphinx's Revs in your hand, they do nothing for 3 mana. If you have 2 pull from tomorrows, you can pay 3, draw a card, and then discard the other pull from tomorrow, and you still have a new card. It's not great, but if you're desperate, it's definitely a better option. Okay, what about for 4 mana?
For 4 mana, Sphinx's Revelation would draw you 1 card, so net 0 cards, and you gain 1 life. Pull from tomorrow gets you 1 card also, right? So,
but it draws 2 and discards 1 of your choice from your hand. Period.
So you're comparing gaining 1 life to looting for 1, right?
Right. I would loot for sure.
I think looting is more powerful than gaining 1 life. Like, and my comparison there would be, there's all kinds of lands that just have gain a life as a text on land, but can you imagine a dual land that came into play and then looted for 1? Like
that would be
bananas. There's no.
Okay, so what
would never do that.
What about? Would you rather rev for 2 or pull for 3? For 5 mana. What do you want? Do you want to draw 3 and then discard a card, or do you want to draw 2 and gain 2?
I think draw 3, discard a card is more powerful still.
I think so too. And this is solid blue. You don't even have to play blue-white. This is solid blue. And then, what's more, once you start getting up to a large enough amount that Sphinx's Rev is getting better, which there's a point, right? Like, there's a point, definitely. But you're, like, is the difference, like, that's so much when you're winning, right? I mean, obviously the life becomes
not always. Like the life matters so much. Like if you just have a bunch of lands and you're getting beaten down, right? Like Sphinx's Rev becomes a great bridge card, right? You're like, I'm going to look through this turn and draw into my answer.
Right, I'm not talking about which one is better in that spot. Definitely, if you're going to like gain 7, you'd often rather, if you've already drawn 7 cards, you would rather gain 7 more times than not than get a loot. But my point is that if you're going to draw 7 cards in the first place, those are the spots where you are often going to be willing to trade some of your percentage points. This is weird that they made this card. This card is so much better than Brain Geyser. This card is so much better than Brain Geyser. Why would they do this?
I mean, just beside the fact that there's just natural synergies, right? Like, maybe you would just, like, pull for X-1 instead of pulling for X because you want to leave a red open so that you can Madness a Fiery Temper, Like,
sure.
I can just totally imagine wanting to do that, you know? Or I can just totally imagine playing with cards like Drownyard Temple in the same deck as Pull from Tomorrow. Like, there are a lot of ways you can get a Drownyard Temple into your graveyard, and that either Pull from Tomorrow is going to put it there for you so that you have, like, even more card advantage in the future, or a little ramping in the future, or you can, like, dump one early, buy it back, and then have more land in play to cast Pull from Tomorrow.
What about Pull from Tomorrow with Archfiend of Ifnir just to put a little value? Yeah, get a -1/-1 counter on your team, in addition to drawing all these cards.
I could see it.
It's something. It triggers your Scribe for your Curator of Mysteries. But if you have Pull from Tomorrow, what about on turn 4, you go, okay, I guess I'll just pull for 2. No big deal. I just want to, make progress. Oh, by the way, I'm going to discard, I don't know, Ulamog. And then drop Liliana on turn 5.
Oh.
And just put Ulamog into play.
You are speaking my language. I don't even have to reanimate Ulamog with Liliana. Just the ability to dump Ulamog out of my hand, it's enough for me. I mean,
yes.
I don't know if I would ever lose a game of Standard if I didn't have 3 Ulamogs stuck in my hand. But we'll never know, because I've lost so many, and I always had Ulamog stuck in my hand.
Dude, why would they make this card?
I don't know. They wanted to make you happy. There's a lot of interesting blue cards, Patrick.
I guess so.
Like, powerful, like Curator of Mysteries is, I think, a good card, and it's so flexible. It is it's like everything to everyone. Like, Pull from Tomorrow is going to be a good card, but it's only really good in a narrow band of ways, right? Curator
Pull from Tomorrow?
Yeah.
Like what? Like blue-red control, blue-white control, Esper control, black control,
it's
Jeskai copycat.
It's good if you have, like, a bunch of available mana. It's, like, increasingly good as you have more available mana, right? And is relatively low impact if you have a small amount of mana, and it doesn't do anything else. Versus Curator of Mysteries it's good if you need a blocker, it's good if you need a threat, it's good if you need to draw your next land. Like, it serves you. It's obviously less powerful than the best Pull from Tomorrow, but it serves you in so many ways when you have specific needs, and one card can fulfill a bunch of different specific needs. That's what I mean. Versus obviously Pull from Tomorrow is going to see play in more than one kind of strategy. I actually think that perhaps it's going to be awesome in green decks, right? It's trivial for green decks to be able to acquire UU right now because of land search. And, dual lands, just the presence of a Botanical Sanctum. And this is a great way to pay off having too many land in play.
There's so many ways.
Get myself to where I want to go.
There's so many ways for green decks to generate mana now. Like, obviously, our preview card from Aether Revolt, Rishkar Pima Renegade, has definitely lived up to to hopes and dreams. But Rishkar Pima Renegade, the fact that you can use the -1/-1 counters as upside with it, like if the -1/-1 counters that your creatures get from stuff like, I don't know, all the random drawback green cards in the set that put -1/-1 counters on things, if you can actually just get lots of extra mana incidentally, and then just channel it into a 7-point Pull from Tomorrow, I don't know. There's something there, particularly if you have, like, Paradox Engine to really be doing it.
Well, the cool thing about this set, I think, is that you don't necessarily need to have Paradox Engine. You could play it a bunch of different ways, right? I think there's going to be a range of decks, that some decks are going to be like, oh, I'm just only a little into these new themes, and some people are going to go deep into the new themes.
Mm-hmm. I guess the drawback with Pull from Tomorrow is supposed to be that Torrential Gearhulk doesn't really work that well with it on the, on the flashback part.
I think. But what adds?
Yeah, I can live with that. I can live with it. Yeah.
But yeah, this set seems super cool, super fun, and potentially super powerful. I'm excited to play it in a couple of weeks.
I am into it.
All right.
Have you had your fill for today? Or
Yeah, I think
I was gonna say, like, we're gonna run out of. It's weird that the preview season has been so compact. Right, like when they turned it on, God, they did not take they did not waste any time getting down to the thick of it.
But I think
we got next week and the week after. Yes. Me too.
So thanks for listening. In particular, everybody, thanks to Eric Kangas.
Thank you, Eric.
One of our many supporters on Patreon. We appreciate your patronage, Eric, and everybody who supports us on Patreon. And we thank you for listening. If you want to share the love, you can follow us on Facebook or Twitter, on Patreon. We're Top Level Podcasts in all those places. And I said earlier, I would like to subscribe to Patrick's podcast. You too can do that. You can subscribe.
Dude, it's your podcast. I'm just living in it.
It's our podcast, and it's the podcast also of the people. They I think they are part of it as well.
And pretty soon it's just going to be Manglehorn's podcast. Let's be serious.
I love Manglehorn. That guy is like square in the center of everything that I like. He's like not very expensive. He has an outsized amount of impact for his mana, but he's not broken. He just Manglehorn is proof that Lauer exists and wants us to be happy. Oh yeah, he just ruins the lives of broken strategies. That's better than being broken.
Yes.
All right.
Awesome, man. Cannot wait for next week. Talk to you then.
Play dread, she's a jailer, hey. Ghostly prison waiting for my untapped phase. Your core trapped in amber stasis freeze. Lost a lot of friends, got left behind. Had to find a way not to lose my mind. Trapped in a vault with nothing but time. Parents and my friends were the key to find. Magic gave me purpose and drive. The game, the love,